Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening. We got some serious questions to address. Um, you know, namely, um, does is is there equal protection under law? What a heavy thing to think about. Um, well, um, I would. Where do I begin with this? I remember my first year in law school. Um, I was taking you take contracts 1 and 2 your first year. And in contracts, the book started with cases from at common law in England, up under where the king, uh, under the monarchy, where the king is the law of the land. And I remember being so confused, like, what the fuck am I learning about this for? And as my professor explained, the American legal system has roots at common law in England, where the king makes the rules. And I noticed something in contracts, which was my favorite class. Um, I noticed that there weren't any cases about the transatlantic slave trade. And I thought that quite odd because the funding for America came from the slave trade, the funding from uh, the money that the startup capital from America and England and many lands came from the transatlantic slave trade. And I thought, given the fact there were so many complex contracts, not only on the land, contracts at admiralty, that's law at war on the water, dealt with slaves, enslaved Africans, and enslaved people, that I was so confused. Like, why the fuck is it not in this book? And then I found out, that's a topic that's avoided. Avoided. Why? Well, ladies and gentlemen, let's go to the Constitution. The Constitution says, the preamble is what? Anybody know the preamble? We the people. Stop right there. In 1776, you have to ask yourself a question. Who were we? Well, unfortunately, foundational Black Americans in 1776, it wasn't us. We was not me. Why? Because I was chattel. Chattel means I was no different than a coffee table or a watch. I was property. So from jump, we did not apply to me. I was property. And I didn't mean to have them bars. It just came out that way. So we're going to look at Dr. Claude Anderson's Black Labor, White Wealth. The second part of the space is why are people confused about ethnicity and race? But we're going to get there when we get there. Got it? All right, let's talk about it. Um, in 1857, there was a landmark case. So let's look at the United States of America. Certain states, namely, hell, I would say the southern states, but California did have slave maxims as well. But there were states that were allegedly um, free states. So in 1857, a black man, I hate looking at his picture. He looks so sad. But in 1857, a black man named Dred Scott, given the fact he was in a free, quote unquote, free state, filed a lawsuit to gain his full rights as an American citizen. And in 1857, according to Dr. Claude Anderson, quote, the Supreme Court's Dred Scott decision in 1857 reflected the prevailing attitude towards legal rights of blacks. Dr. Anderson says, although it taken 11 years for the case to reach the Supreme Court, they had ignored that shit for 11 years. For 11 years, it was in lower courts, but I digress. The ruling was swift and sure. The Dred Scott decision stated emphatically that neither free nor enslaved blacks were considered to be citizens, hence, could not sue for their freedom. Representing the majority opinion, Supreme Court Justice Taney wrote, quote, blacks are inferior beings, and as property, they lack citizenship and have no rights that a black man is bound to respect. Now, with this young man, this honor student, who had to defend himself um, the other day, I thought about that. I didn't say anything, but I was thinking about Dred Scott case. I was wondering, was that a reverberation based on that that case? Dr. Anderson further says, following the Civil War, Congress, for partisan reasons, modified the Constitution to eliminate the most egregious wrongs against blacks. In the late 1860s, Congress enacted the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. These constitutional amendments were specifically enacted to abolish slavery, grant black citizenship with equal protection, which goes to the title, and voting rights for blacks. However, the Supreme Court emasculated the 14th and 15th Amendment with a succession of unfavorable court rulings that restored Southerners' control over blacks. The 14th Amendment, as Dr. Anderson pointed out, was created to as a restorative amendment specifically for Black Americans, which is why Donald Trump was using the 14th Amendment with his one of his first executive orders to eliminate immigrants from inheriting that birthright citizenship. And Donald Trump is right about that because it had nothing to do with immigrants. But as Dr. Anderson pointed out in the passage I just read, the moment the 14th and 15th Amendments were passed, 13th, 14th, and 15th, they were they were passed for us, but legal scholars, white supremacist legal scholars, worked overtime to weaponize them against us. The 13th Amendment, which granted us basically emancipation. It doesn't say emancipation in the 13th Amendment, but I'm just saying that for sake of argument, was used to enslave us another way. Ladies and gentlemen, never let anybody tell you that slavery is abolished. If a teacher says that, they need to take his license because the 13th the 13th Amendment clearly states um, uh, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude except for a commission of a crime. Stop right there. So the 13th Amendment weaponized criminality. The legal system was used against us to enslave us and use us as slaves once we've been committed of a crime. So then again, certain things start becoming crimes that weren't crimes, like vagrancy. In my home state of Alabama, vagrancy laws popped up left and right. So you had a bunch of black men, very few were lucky enough to get a job at Sloss Furnace, but majority of us were unemployed. What are you going to do when you're unemployed? You're going to walk around. So you put out a law that says vagrancy. If you're a vagrant, you're going to be arrested and convicted. They convict black men for walking around because they don't have a job. What the fuck are they supposed to do? And what do you do with these black men? You use them as slaves on the railroad. You see how this shit works? The 14th Amendment um, was initially was argued in the Supreme Court that it didn't, even though it was enacted for blacks, it was argued that it didn't apply to blacks. It applied to corporations. Just some fucking nonsense. So that's what we're looking at. So with that being said, is equal protection under the law? Does the law protect us? Wani, Nikki, does the law protect foundational black Americans? What y'all think?
No. One of the things that I noticed was that when some of these laws are subjective, like when you have to decide if someone thought they were threatened, one of the things that I noticed is that a white person can say that they're threatened, they felt threatened just because someone was brown. And everybody agrees with them that yeah, that would be threatening. A black person walking on your property, that's threatening. You have the right to shoot them. But on the flip side, if a white person is walking on a black person's property, they're not supposed to be frightened because the people listening to the case are often white. So they're going to say, well, a white guy walking on the property is not threatening because he looks like my uncle. I know where he's coming from. I understand this guy. So their perception is woven into the law that a little black child knocking on your door is a threat, and that child must be shot in the face. And there's excuses made for that person. Even though that guy did get in trouble, excuses are made for that behavior. So their stupid, irrational behavior is part of law. So if a black guy, say a regular black guy from a CEO position, his car breaks down and he wants to make a call and he knocks on a white man's door in the middle of the night. The white man has the right to shoot him in the face because he's threatened. But if it was the other way around, and a big bulky football player white boy was broken down and he knocked on a black woman's door in the middle of the night, she shouldn't be afraid of him because he's just a big corn-fed white boy that reminds the judge of his nephew. It reminds everybody on the court listening to the case, oh, he looks like my son. Why was that black woman threatened? And so when it gets down to it, if someone like me shoots somebody for breaking into their house because I felt threatened, it's just going to come down to that. It's going to be subjective. Well, you shouldn't have been threatened by a white man, but we can say we're threatened by a 14-year-old boy and shoot him to death. We can say we're scared of a 12-year-old boy running around with a fake squirt gun and kill him because he was threatening to the cop. That's what they've been doing. They can always just adjust it to fit their irrational fears. Every black man is threatening to them. Black women, children, everybody is a threat to them. They're frightened. They have an inherent fear because they know that someone should get back at them for all of the crimes that they've done against humanity, against us, and we're still here. We didn't disappear. They killed everybody else that they came into contact with like that. They died of disease. They've gotten rid of entire groups of people, but we're still standing. And so their answer to that is to be fearful. They should be fearful. Nobody has ever put uh, a hand against them, not in a real way, not in the way that they know they deserve. And this is what they have, an inherent embedded fear. But I'm not supposed to be frightened of white boys. I'm supposed to just let them run up on me and say, oh, well, wait a minute. Let me see. Why are you coming up on me? Ask a bunch of questions. I don't get to defend myself. I've got to ask all kinds of preliminary questions before I shoot them. That's what we're supposed to do.
Well, what Wani said is 100% correct. Um, but the question is, why is she said what was correct? When this is the thing we wrap our heads around and say, what the hell? We live in a nation of laws. Why? How does what Wani said works? Well, y'all are lucky because I'm gonna tell you how that shit works. Well, the legislators make law, legislation being the Article 1, what we call Congress. They make their lawmakers. But when, as I was told, when laws are made, they get tried in court. That's kind of a no-brainer. So we had these 13th, 14th, and 5th Amendments made exclusively for us to restore, as a restorative measure. Well, what happened? Well, like I said earlier, white, I'm not going to say suspected white supremacists. I'm going to say white supremacist legal minds worked a night and day to try to put precedents on the books to counter um our gains almost immediately. So how does that work? According to Dr. Claude Anderson, the court's aggressive rulings against blacks accelerated after emancipation. So the court start ruling to put um precedents on the book that negated the 14th Amendment. In 1883, the court voided the Civil Rights Act of 1875 and refused to strike down discrimination by individual citizens. In 1896, the Supreme Court further reinforced its notion that blacks were not to be respected. How they do it? According to Dr. Claude Anderson, quote, when it gave blessings to Jim Crow system of separate but equal case of Plessy versus Ferguson, Ladies and gentlemen, get out a pen and a paper, because Jim Crow was backed up. We hear that term a lot, this vague shit. And don't you let nobody say no goddamn Juan Crow, because Jim Crow was backed up with a case, baby. Plessy versus Ferguson. What happened then? What happened in Plessy versus Ferguson? Let me remind y'all right quick. The state of Louisiana enacted the Separate Car Act, which required separate railway cars for blacks and whites. So, bam, here goes a railroad that, mind you, we fucking built. Louisiana said, even though the Negroes built the railroad, we need to separate the cars. The whites need better cars than the blacks. We can't have them riding together. Bunch of bullshit. So here go, here goes the whole mulatto or light skin issue of the that mantra we talk about, Wani, about like um, uh, people fighting for the lineage or betraying. Homer in 1892, Homer Plessy, who is 7/8 Caucasian, he was mixed, agreed to participate in the test to challenge the act. So Homer Plessy, we're seeing another pattern. Homer Plessy was kind of like a male version of Rosa Parks.
Rosa Parks, yeah.
Yeah, buddy. People don't talk about that shit, but he was the original Rosa Parks. What did he agree to do? He agreed to challenge the act. He was solicited by the committee des citizens, that means a committee of citizens, a group of New Orleans residents who sought to repeal the act. They said it was bullshit. It was. They asked Plessy, who was technically black under Louisiana law, but he looked white, to sit in a whites only car for a Louisiana train. The um the railroad cooperated because it thought the act imposed unnecessary cost. You see how it's never about justice? The railroad rolled with it because they said it was too expensive to have two different cars. It had shit to do with race for them. But I digress. Through the purchase of additional road cars, when Plessy was told to vacate the whites only car, he refused and he was arrested. Now you have a case. What happened at trial? At trial, Plessy's
They
attorney.
ruled against. Oh,
Yep.
go ahead. I'm
No,
sorry.
go ahead. Go ahead, Nikki. Go ahead.
They ruled against him. He was 1/8 white. He was 1/8 black, and they still ruled against him that he wasn't white enough to sit in the whites only car.
These people are crazy, man. She's right. She's 100% right. At the trial, the attorneys argued that that separate car violated what amendments that we just got passed? The 13th and 14th Amendment.
In the 14th.
Yes, ma'am. What did the judge say? The judge found that Louisiana could enforce this law insofar as it affected the railroads within its boundaries. And Plessy was his ass got convicted. What was the question of the court? The question was: does a separate car act violate the 14th Amendment? What do y'all think?
No,
Yep.
they're saying that it did not because as long as the separate facilities for each race were equal, and you know they are never equal. The fountains weren't equal that they were drinking out of. The schools were never equal.
Right. Right. Here goes the bullshit. The court held that the state law was constitutional. And when I tell you why, it's gonna be a bunch of bullshit. In an opinion authored by Justice Billings Brown, the majority upheld state and post-racial segregation. Justice Brown conceded that the 14th Amendment intended to establish absolute equality for the races before law, but it held that the separate treatment did not imply the inferiority of African Americans. Ain't that some bullshit? Of course it implied inferiority. We had different cars, and the cars weren't the same, right? We still see states.
Let me ask a
Go.
question. So they had a train with cars, not separate cars, right?
Right.
Just
Got
cars.
it.
And then when we wanted to sit in there, they said you can't sit in our cars. Why is
Yes,
it
ma'am.
their car? Why is it their
When they
cars?
didn't pay for it, you goddamn good question.
I, I mean, how do they figure it's their cars? They're
It's the
basically
same.
saying
It's the
all the
same as the
cars are
white lady at
theirs.
the. It's the same as the white lady at the condo place where she'll stop a random black person and say, "Hey, you can't come in this
Hmm.
building. You don't live here." It's the same thing.
Thank you, Nikki. What Nikki is implying, ladies and gentlemen, is ain't shit changed. Share out this room, ladies and gentlemen, because we going there tonight. Um, so ain't shit changed.
And
The-
their anger is always misdirected because whenever they get caught doing this, they're just picking on some middle class black person that lives in the same manner that they live in terms of cleanliness or socioeconomic level. And they're just attacking them because they're black, not because they're actually a bum or doing something or some immigrant not even speaking English. And then they get bombarded with all these foreigners and they don't even react. I mean, they're just starting to react to this. I've seen people that are doing all kind of things in their buildings, like taking it over at gunpoint and taking the rent from them. They barely reacted to that. In fact, they denied it, didn't they? Colorado was like, that's not happening. But you let a black guy walk down the sidewalk, they'll be ready to call the homeowners association, neighborhood watch, and everybody be running up on him, killing and talking about, I felt threatened. But you're not threatened with Venezuelans taking over your apartment, right? Am I understanding that?
yep, you are. Here goes the important part, Black Americans. Um, like I've said ad infinitum, um, we go through these cycles of Black Americans almost getting justice. So the Civil War happened. We talked about that the other day. And after the Civil War, we got Reconstruction, and things were starting to get equal again. Uh, General, oh Lord, what's his name? Tecumseh Sherman gave us, or at the suggestion of some brilliant foundational Black American elders, gave us Special Field Order 15. So we got houses on the land, 40 acres, and blah blah blah. That shit was taken away from us. Lincoln got assassinated. That was part of a fucking conspiracy. You're never supposed to let the black man rise. That's part of his little fraternity he was in. I'll talk about that in a book in about a year or two. But so what happened? Andrew Johnson, a Democrat. Let me say that shit again. Johnson, a Democrat, took away Special Field Order 15. And guess what? According to Dr. Claude Anderson, Southern whites again had control of the land. But guess what the fuck they didn't have? They didn't have no money and they didn't have no labor. Dr. Anderson says for the second time, black labor was commandeered and used to develop Southern economic and social structure. And how did they use black labor? Well, they couldn't put us in slavery because slavery was abolished, right? Not really. They used the 13th Amendment. That's when the criminalization of black people came in full effect. Dr. Anderson says Southern states passed highly discriminatory black codes to keep blacks in a position of servitude. The codes, a mandate for slavery, which gave white Southerners a manageable and inexpensive labor force. We are the money, ladies and gentlemen. Give us our goddamn reparation. If y'all hear about a reparations legal team, tell them to consult. Man, I'll do this shit pro bono and help them with their research. Dr. Anderson says the codes and subsequent laws and ordinances, as indicated in the appendix, made it illegal for blacks to engage in normal social behavior, such as, y'all ready for this shit? Owning a dog, looking out the same window that whites look out. This is law, ladies and gentlemen. Looking out the same goddamn window was illegal of a white. And raising and selling agricultural products. There goes our black farmers being attacked. Y'all see? You see it now? And crossing a state line and being on the street after dark. I just said being on the street after dark was codified at law to be illegal. Dr. Claude Anderson says this brilliantly. Quote, the nature of black codes effectively nullified the 13th Amendment and permitted local law enforcement agencies to arrest blacks and place them in involuntary servitude as criminals who had been duly convicted. It was common for the local sheriffs to provide Southern planters with imprisoned blacks for free labor. Blacks were forbidden to work without written contracts, and they were also forbidden to learn to read and write. Though they could read legal contracts, they were bound and in many instances were arrested for having breached or broken the terms of their sharecropping agreements. We were getting arrested for breaking terms of sharecropping agreements. That's how this works, ladies and gentlemen. It's called black codes. Do black codes still exist? We're gonna talk about that in a moment. But until that point, Twizzle, what's on your mind, man?
Come on, Twizzle.
Hey, sorry, y'all. You know it's a delay once you give the mic over and
Yes,
everything.
sir.
Oh my God, Professor Dude, you just hit something that was very striking, that was very, very sensitive and emotional for the simple fact this is a fight of mine. This is a personal fight of mine because, as you know, as I was doing my research on the Black Wall Street, on how the police just and the government and the white people just came through there and killed everybody, we have those unwritten laws, and everything that you said, Professor, those laws are still on the books,
Hey,
bro.
man.
What good is a law? A law is only as good as if it's enforced. But if it's not enforced, it's still on the books. And those laws are still on the books. And that's how they're getting away with so much racism, segregation, and murder. Because we all know the laws on the books was it's okay to kill a black man if you're correcting them. You know what I mean? If you're correcting them, you can kill, you can go as far as murder just to check them and put them in their place. And those laws are still on the books right now to this day, especially with that 13th Amendment. And that's my fight. As my part of my reparations claim, when I go up there and speak a favor, give me a mic, I'm going to tell them I want the overturnment of that because that also says that black men are three-fourths of human beings. And as you said, Professor, to where we couldn't look out of windows, we couldn't own a dog, we couldn't get married. That's where jumping the broom come from. You know what I'm saying? And a lot of other shit that we couldn't even walk down the street. My uncle's 83 years old from Jasper, Texas. He told me when his parents used to be, him and his parents used to be walking down the street as a little boy, when they see white people coming, they had to run, not walk. They had to run into the street and let the white people walk on the sidewalk. And when they did it, they had to look down because they couldn't look them in the eye.
Man, my
Come on, man.
daddy's a lot younger than your uncle, and dad. Now fuck all that bullshit about things being better in the north. Dad grew up in Baltimore, and dad said when you were walking down the street in the '60s, and a white person I mean not the street, the sidewalk, and a white lady's walking the other way, you had to get your ass off the sidewalk and wait in the street until she passed by. That's how black codes work, or your ass would get arrested. So
Not only
miss me
that,
with that equal
yeah.
protection shit. Go ahead, Twizzle.
Do not make a white woman mad. Don't even look at a white woman because that was death. A white woman was death automatically. She could just point and be like, I don't like him. You was in a tree swinging that night. You know what I'm saying? And that's something that is major and is passionate about me because part of my lineage, my mother told me that the Ku Klux Klan ran our family out of Little Rock, Arkansas, all because her adopted parents were successful, and they said if they are here in 48 hours, they'd be dead. So they left Little Rock, Arkansas, and came to Oakland, California on the train overnight. My uncle told me the same similar story that when he was in Jasper, Texas, at 10 years old, he was working at a restaurant as a dishwasher. He said, little white girl he went to school with just came in there and was like, hi, JC. And all the white men in front saw it and heard it. And he said, at that instant, they all got up and walked outside. And he said, the waitress grabbed the little girl and shook her up. It's like, you're about to get him killed. So he said, the waitress grabbed him and took him out the back door and told him, go home right now and tell your parents what happened. And he did. When he told his parents what happened, they put him in the trunk of a car, drove him to Beaumont, Texas, and put him on a Greyhound train to California that night,
Wow.
because that night the Ku Klux Klan came to his house looking for him and was finna kill him, all because a little white girl he went to school with said
Wow, that's sad.
IJC. He tell me these stories all the time. He tell me the stories like, you know how Texas had those long roads. You know what I'm saying? He said if they didn't make it home, because them long roads was miles. So if you didn't make it home, you had to walk miles. And he said if they didn't make it home before the sun went down, they had to walk backwards in case if they saw headlights. When they saw headlights, they had to dive in the ditch and hide in the bushes because if a car saw them, that was death. That's what they used to look for. That's where they had night riders to where they would come out looking for black people. You know what I'm saying? I just seen somebody posted a picture of a little white boy standing in front of a car that had $200 for nigga ears, $100 a ear. You know what I'm saying? That's
What
what they
is
used to
that
do to us.
about?
They used to hunt us.
What are
They
they
used to really
doing
hunt
with those
us.
ears? Eating them or
They
just
used to eat
showing
them.
them as
Yes, they would
souvenirs?
eat
You're
them.
disgusting.
Sister Ronnie, they would eat
I saw
us.
the
They would
cookbook.
eat us
I saw the
because
cookbook.
they would eat us for the simple fact they feel like they absorbing our energy. You know, they feel like they're getting black
Yeah,
man's energy because they consume melanin, so they have melanin. You know what I'm saying? That's always been
that's
their
a global
philosophy. If
belief.
they had an enemy, yeah, if they had an enemy that was greater, they would consume their enemy, feeling like they're consuming his strength, his knowledge, and everything. You know what I'm saying? But I don't want to go on and on, even though I'm from Oakland like too short, because I don't know how I could last so long. But hey, thank you, Professor and Nikki. Hey, Sister Wani. Bop, 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 bop. Bitch, here I go. I'm gonna land my
Yeah,
plane
what
there.
Twizzle said happened to W. E. Du Bois's arrogant ass when he got to Atlanta with his Harvard PhD. He thought he was on top of the world and part of the system. And according to our brother Tariq Nasheed, he was walking past a butcher shop and saw pieces of Nat Turner. I think that's what brother Nasheed said, Nat Turner for sale. And was like, okay, fuck this. You know what I'm saying? But it shouldn't have to take all that. We need to recognize where things are, where we are. We need to encourage these little kids to go to law school and work for the community, not work for these corporations. Um, Dr. Anderson says the 13th Amendment, mind you, which is the amendment that I don't want to say freed, which helped our situation with slavery. The 13th Amendment contained an exception clause that cleared the way for a century. Let me say that shit again for the reparationists in here. Fucking century of involuntary black servitude. You lock them up, right? Dr. Anderson says because black had no income alternatives, although the government had promised compensation for slaves upon emancipation, blacks never received the promised 40 acres of land, tools, or the mule, abandoned without resources. Most black freemen had little recourse but accept the white planters' terms. And guess what? We're back in slavery, ladies and gentlemen. Ain't shit changed. Go ahead, Men's. Men's going once.
Mm, Men's fell asleep again.
Go ahead, Stacy.
He has a short attention span.
That's that East Coast term.
Mm-hmm.
So, hey, you guys, Professor, Miss Nikki, Miss
Hey,
Wani, what up, Twizzle? So, to kind of
Official as the referee's whistle.
West Coast,
Stacy,
Hey,
look,
hi.
West Coast in the house. No, I'm just kidding. But to kind of piggyback off of what Nikki, you funny, what Twizzle has said, it triggered. I was like, oh God, I gotta speak because it triggered a memory. No, first when you was talking about they eat us, they were eating black folks because they think they were absorbing. And I said, is that where that you are what you eat comes from? Because they
Wow.
try.
yes
they
indeed.
have
Yes indeed. Not only that, that's where picnic come
Yeah,
from.
I
they
do know
have
that.
a there's a global belief that eating something you absorb the powers of it.
Right.
And I believe it comes from the gods because all of the gods would eat each other and say, now I have this god's powers. So maybe these gods were consuming each other and getting each other's powers, but it doesn't translate to humans because, it doesn't work like that. Okay.
Right. I'm saying in
It
their
just doesn't
twisted
work like that.
minds, their twisted minds, that's probably what they were thinking. But I think personally a lot of us, we all have, our families have some sort of story because survival of the fittest. And I remember my cousin telling me about my great grandfather who I never got to meet, but he was mixed. He could have passed, but he hated white people because of what they had done to him. Similar to that story about the girl, the little white girl saying hi. Well, he, I guess, had was had befriended a white girl. They weren't together, anything like that. weren't boyfriend and girlfriend, nothing like that. They just happened to be walking together. I guess I don't know if they're walking to school or whatever, but I think it might have been maybe some of her brothers and some other white dudes was with them. Saw them beat my great grandfather up really bad and left him for dead. They let his dad know, who was a German man, let him know where his son was. And this, they were in Mississippi at the time, and I can't remember what part of Mississippi what he said, but because I remember him asking, he goes, "Do you know how great Grandpa Frank got to Meridian?" And I said, "No, I don't know anything about him." So that's when he told me the story. And he said that same day they went and got him, went home, packed up everything they had, and moved to Meridian. I was like, that's a doggone shame. Like, and then even my grandmother, there's so many instances that we have where it's like, wow, if something would have happened, I would have never existed. My grandmother, I found out from my mom, her mother had a metal plate in her head. I was like, my whole life that I knew that my grandmother was alive, I never knew that about her. Well, because when they were living in Texas, she'd been in a really bad car accident, and um and I don't even know how the accident happened, if she was hit, if white people caused it, but she was left, and people kept passing her up, passing her up, passing her up, wouldn't help her. A bunch of white folks just looking and wouldn't, while she's bleeding out. Finally, a black couple saw her. They had to they had to drive farther to a black hospital because they wouldn't see her at a white hospital. I was like, that's a doggone shame. And I don't know if I mentioned it before. I don't know if it was in this space or another space, but same, there was an incident with my mom's dad, grandfather, when he was little, cut school one day, got picked up by some white people. They put him on a boat, didn't know where he was going, didn't know how to swim, but he jumped off that boat and somehow made it to land and busted in the house after 5 o'clock, after late.
He got
And
Shanghai. He got
yeah,
Shanghai.
they were trying to get him and he managed to escape. And I was thinking, man, all these instances where I almost would have never existed had they not survived what they went through. It's so deep. It's just crazy.
Let me tell you, yeah, that's crazy, Stacy. Thank you for your contribution. Let me tell y'all some shit that's gonna piss you off. According to Claude Anderson, well, let me say it this way. I taught in Memphis for the last, what, 12 years or something, 13 years. And in 12 years. And in Memphis, I taught at a high school. I was teaching computer science right outside of Millington. Now Millington's a Navy base there. Millington's kind of like the country. It is a country. And I noticed half my students would just disappear in October. And I was like, what the heck? Where are they going? And one of the older black men there in his 60s was like, oh, um, there are still sharecroppers. There's a lot of farms in Millington outside the Navy base. And he let me know that these white farmers, this is in 2017, y'all. White farmers still have they have like areas in their house, in the back of their house and their farm that look like a little apartments, right? And these students, I'm talking about teenagers, y'all, would drop out of school for a couple of months and with their mama and granddaddy and them move back in with white folks to grow the crops. And and it just got that shit confused me until I read Black Labor White Wealth. What did Dr. Anderson say about that? Dr. Anderson says, quote, in some southern states, advertisements invited blacks to voluntarily re-enter slavery for the benefit of the South. The old white masters in the nation, just as a socio-political context nullified the effectiveness of the 13th Amendment for blacks, it also made the 14th Amendment a dead letter for blacks. The Equal Protection Clause was written into the Constitution as part of the 14th Amendment, in 1868, but it wasn't until 1954 that this language was interpreted to make it unconstitutionally to overtly and explicitly discriminate against black. Well, that's nice that Dr. Anderson said that, but I'm telling you, in 2017, I still had groups of students, children, 16, 14, 15, 16, that would do sharecropping, drop out of school, ladies and gentlemen, to do this. So this shit probably still going on today. This exploitation. Dr. Anderson says the court interpreted the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments broadly and applied them to many situations unrelated to blacks. And that's where we are right now. The 14th Amendment is being applied to immigrants. That shit is dangerous. I'm not a political person, but I hope that the Supreme Court doesn't just ignore and bury Trump's executive order, because it needs to be restored. This is our opportunity to have the 14th Amendment restored for us, because just like Dr. Anderson eloquently said, um, it was taken away from us to make it unrelated. This is sabotage, ladies and gentlemen, and we need that protection from the 14th Amendment. Dr. Anderson says by the turn of the century, the court used this new constitutional amendments primarily to protect the wealth of major corporations. What do you mean by that? He meant that the 14th Amendment, the Supreme Court, check this bullshit out. Now we all know the 14th Amendment belongs to us. The Supreme Court said, no, no, no. It doesn't belong to blacks. It's not about protecting the rights of blacks. It's about protecting the rights of corporations. My question to y'all is, how the fuck do they get away with this nonsense? Any kindergartner would know that it wasn't intended for corporations, but I digress. In 1886, the Supreme Court used the 14th Amendment on equal protection and due process to abolish 230 state laws that regulated corporations. They're using the 14th Amendment to protect corporations. Anything but us. What is it going to take, ladies and gentlemen, for us to get our 14th Amendment back? But I digress. Go ahead, Twizzle.
I, I
Oh,
was
go
gonna,
ahead, Wani, and then Twizzle.
I was just
Go
gonna
ahead, Sister
say real
Wani.
quick before we get too far away from white women being hyper protected by white men and them. I don't believe that they were protecting white women. They've been very nasty to white women. That's why white women had to have all kinds of women's rights movements. They have been really like having sex with enslaved women, having concubines in their face, having the bedroom right next to their room, having 5 children running around the White House or Monticello or wherever these presidents are. That is that's very I don't know what type of relationships they were having, but when I read about it, it just seemed like the women didn't have a voice. They didn't have the right to speak up and say, "You're cheating on me." And they said the other aspect was because so much money was being made with slavery that they weren't going to say anything because they wanted to maintain their wealth. So white women chose to maintain their wealth over their dignity. But I was just going to say, what a overcorrection that I see now. White women are, a dime a dozen. Anybody can get one. Nobody cares. And now you have the most precious white girls in the world, a 10-year-old girl being, and they're calling it groomed. No, they're being raped by Pakistani gangs and nobody cares. Now is the time to show that you care about your the girls and young women in your lineage, and now you're looking the other way and renaming rape. They're literally being raped, and it's being renamed to groomed. They're not groomed. They're 10. They're 10. Yeah, some of them are 14 and 15, but they're still little. And these Pakistani gangs are, manipulating them, getting them, catching them on the way home from school, doing it in front of cameras. And the authorities in the UK, they won't protect their girls. People in Scandinavia, they won't protect their women. So these are the same people, right, that were running around here. You looked at a white woman, you have to swing on a rope. But now they're grabbing up tiny little girls,
One
putting them in situations and uh, grooming them, running them through, turning them into prostitutes and everything else. And they're not doing it. They're
Sister
not saying
Ronnie,
anything about it. They're just renaming rape so that it goes down smoother, goes down your ears smoother.
more
Yeah.
acceptable, more acceptable. But Sister Ronnie, the first slaves were white women. In the words and the teachings of Dr. John Henry Clark, the white woman was the slave for the simple fact the conditions in their environment was so harsh to where the white man who had an establishment to where he had a cave with fire and food, he told her, either you do what the hell I tell you or you go out there and you deal with the wilds of Europe. Shout out to that movie Quest for Fire. And that explains it all. You know what I'm saying? It's y'all touched on so many topics. It's like I'm fucking, going through a fucking Rolodex or I'm going through a series trying to figure out which show I want to watch because our conversations be so educational and so eye-opening and so, you know what I'm saying, enlightening to where I don't know where to come from. I want to talk about when we was on the berserk. We was on the eating
Yeah.
thing, but then y'all got into that. But I remember Sister Whitney and Professor, y'all know, but when they came to consuming things, that's where the term berserker come from.
Really, tell
Berserkers,
me
the
about
holy
it.
Vikings that they turned by. The term berserker came from to where when Scandinavia, when the so-called Vikings came of age, their tribe of men, they had to go into the wild. They had to go nomadic and they had to kill a bear. But the most important thing was they had to consume the bear. Because once they consumed the bear, they absorbed and developed the strength of the bear. So that's where the term berserker come from. Bear zerker. That's where that come from. You know what I'm saying? Because they felt like they had the strength of the bear, so they was able to fight more than any other man. It's a famous battle in England called Battle of Hastings Bridge, to where it was one Viking who stood up on the bridge, and they said he was a berserker. He stood up on the bridge and held off the whole British army for hours. I think he killed anywhere between 40 to 50 British by himself. 40, 50 men by himself. He stood there with an axe, and they said he was a berserker because he was supposed to have been like 7 feet tall, covered in bear skin because he so-called killed so many bears to where he couldn't be beat. The only way they beat him to where they went up under a bridge in a barrel and stuck a pipe through the bridge and killed him. Like they put a spear through the bridge and hit him up under his balls and ass and killed him. That was the only way they can beat him. But yet,
Did it
as
well?
we speak on them anyway, Sister Wani, as we speak on them consuming things, thinking that they're absorbing the energy of the animal or their enemy, that goes back thousands of years. And all you gotta do is say berserker, because the term bear, the term wolf god, you know what I mean? As where Beowulf, that's where all that comes from.
But you
But
know
then
that that's what the Chinese medicine is based on. If I eat these deer antlers that are
facts.
filled with testosterone, then
not only that, the tiger
if
penis.
I eat a fetus, they have fetus capsules. Google it. Google it. You don't want to Google it. Google it. If I eat a fetus capsule, I'll have a fetus in my stomach, or I'll be more apt to be fertile. Their medicine is based on that. Um, they had the King's Drops. That was a German medication, and it was ground up skull. And so they figured, hey, if I ground up somebody's head bones, that's good for headaches. Okay, if you say so. No, you just ate a skull for no reason. And then they were having mummy tea, remember? And they thought they were going to have the
Those were Egyptian
yeah,
mummies, mom. Wani.
Egyptian
Those
mummy.
they were eating. They was ingesting Egyptian
Mm-hmm.
mummies, thinking that they were getting the strength and
The
the
grandeur.
knowledge of the
They
pharaohs.
wanted everything
Yeah,
from the Pharaoh. So this feeling is universal across everybody. You can go into the deepest, darkest jungle, and you'll have some guy in Papua New Guinea eating a piece of his ancestor's brain, which they said stop doing that because they caused a brain disease similar to mad cow disease. You're not supposed to do that. And so they were coming down with that. I have seen every group on earth believe that if they ingest certain things, especially their enemy, this is very popular, especially in the Aztec, Inca, and Maya world. If I eat my enemy,
Preach,
I will get
preach.
his powers. Where are they getting this from? Because I'm not, if I eat Twizzle, I'm not going to be Twizzle. I'm just going to get a stomach ache from eating a person, right? So it's not true, but the reason they have this strong feeling, universal feeling that this is true, this is a universal feeling, and it's embedded in their culture. We're not talking about Jeffrey Dahmer. We're talking about their cultural belief. We're not talking about somebody who crashed in the Andes and had to eat some people, unfortunately. We're not talking about people on a shipwreck that had to eat, the first mates. We're talking about they have agreed as people that eating people is eating the powers of the person. They have all agreed on this, and the reason they've agreed is because some gods of all of these people told them that that's how you gain powers. Greek gods said it, Norse gods said it, and all the others. They all said, yeah, if I inject, but it might work on gods and not on people. So I don't know what they're doing.
So the gods, the Norse gods and the Greek gods endorse cannibalism.
They
Well,
said that if they eat each other, they gain those aspects and powers and principles of those others.
Wani, you're waking something up. That's ultimately the source of all this evil is spirits that these folks are involved with. These evil fucking spirits that they worship are telling them to do all kind of shit. Or in the other space, we were talking about Columbus praising God that he stole some children to sell. Just craziness. But I want to wake something else up that Wani was talking about with white women. I'm paraphrasing you, Wani, but you were talking about how white they didn't care about white women, and they treat them awfully, which is horrible. But I wanted to point out to y'all when and where did white women get their freedom? There was the 19th Amendment, and something that's not really talked about. Dr. Howard Zinn identifies in his book is basically white women got their freedom, their right to vote under the 19th Amendment. Why did they get that? Because white women were allowed to join the union. I think it was the UWW, but they were allowed to join a union. And guess what happened to happen at the same time? Black men were allowed to join the union. And white women weaponized black men. They start having sexual relations with them, and that sexual relation between white professional women and black men, particularly in New York and Harlem, kind of galvanized. It became a bargaining chip. Like, hey, if you don't give me my rights, I'm gonna keep going out with a Martell, and bam, the 19th Amendment. Look at the 19th Amendment. That shit does not include FBA women. It doesn't include Asian women. It doesn't include Hispanic women. It doesn't include Indian women. It doesn't include. It only includes white women. In the beginning, black women didn't get their right to vote until the fucking 1960s. Why don't we know this? Why is this hidden in history? Um, Dr. Howard Zinn says of the 14th Amendments brought before the Supreme Court between 1890 and 1901, only 19 dealt with blacks versus 288 corporations. Ain't that a fucking mess? The 14th Amendment was passed exclusively for blacks. Trump was right when he did that executive order. That shit belongs to us. But overwhelmingly, damn, if I can do the percentage right, 90 some percent of the cases were used the 14th Amendment to justify corporations. That was done on purpose to make people think that the 14th Amendment, which that belongs to us, had nothing to do with us. And now the 14th Amendment is trying to be usurped from us again by applying it to who? Immigrants. Come on, Capone, what's on your mind? We go to Capone and BJ.
Hey, good evening, Professor Sister Wani, Sister Nikki, the greats in the room. Is equal protection under the law, and why are people confused about it? No, there's two tiers of justice, as we can see with Rodney King all the way to OJ and to our brother today. These two tiers of justice, are holding us back from us being who we really are. And great scholarship on the history, professor. But I mean, for the ones who don't know that, they should know that, because that's important for us to go ahead and I agree with my brother Twizzle on that 13th Amendment situation. We need to get that repealed or, done off with, because a lot of these things is going on right now. If this little brother don't get equal justice, all these laws in the book gonna be null and void. That's how I feel about it. But, great situation, great room. We need to touch up on these scholars and touch up on this knowledge. Love, peace, reparations, delineations, and deportations.
I wanted to touch up.
Hey, I'm sorry,
Go
Professor. I'm
ahead.
sorry to be rude, but this is something I gotta say because
Go
it's
ahead,
on my
Twizzle.
mind,
Go
and this is
ahead.
something that's real serious to Black America. They're trying to bring back the right to harm us, assault us, and kill us. They're trying to bring back the
Facts.
right to where they can have control over our women, our sisters, our daughters, and
with
our babies.
impunity.
They are trying to bring that back. That's why you see the absence of black men. That's why you see the so-called black women who so-called leaders, they're married to white men. You know what I'm
Or
saying?
you see a black
That's
dude
what's
in the
going
commercial
on
with a
right
white
now.
woman or some shit like that.
Yes, but you don't even see no black men in commercials no more, period. Even in
Yeah,
sports right
yes
now,
you
they
do.
getting rid of black men,
You
period.
see them in
No,
commercials.
them is
You see the
Nigerians
gay black men in the AIDS
Oh
and
commercials.
those are
yeah,
Africans.
yeah.
And those are Africans. Those are Africans. But just to get to my point, and this is dead serious, y'all. They're trying to bring back the right to where they're trying to kill our rights and they want to have authority over us, especially with these Asian immigrants that they're giving money and power to, and some of these so-called taco eaters that they're giving power to. They want to have them to be able to possess the right to where they can have the ability to enforce that 13th Amendment to where they have the ability to go all the way to kill us to correcting us. You know what I'm saying? That's what they're trying to do right now. That's why they progress. That's why they're projecting all this shit on the media. You know what I mean? I'm dead ass serious about this. And this is something that we really need to stand 10 toes down on. We're not allowing we're not allowing no unjust murders. We're not allowing these motherfucking black people, these black kids, and all these black people getting swung by trees talking about it's suicide. We're not allowing that now. It's a whole nother world, it's a whole nother time, and we are not our grandparents. We not
Well, yeah, that's very true. And brother Twizzle, I know you're nonviolent. You're just being a scholar with it. I got you. But I want to wake up what Twizzle said. My purpose is to tell y'all why. The question is why are they doing that? And to understand why, let's go to Dr. Frances Cress Wells and then let her cook for a minute. Dr. Welsing gave us the why. On page 186, Welsing said, within the historical framework of Western civilization and culture, parens the civilization of culture organized to prevent white genetic annihilation. Welsing says all white people have the spoken or unspoken mandate to participate actively in their collective struggle for global white genetic survival. This specifically means, of necessity, listen to this, the murder and slaughter of black and other non white males whenever it is felt within the white collective to be necessary and therefore justified. Why? Dr. Welsing says, because black males of all non white males have the greatest potential to genetically annihilate the white collective. Black males will experience the greatest ferocity of white supremacy's attacks through justifiable homicide because black and other non-white males have the potential to produce white genetic annihilation through the use of their genitalia, and be it because genetic annihilation is the most fundamental fear of the global white collective. This collective involves a counter weapon system of weapons that theoretically could achieve non-white genetic annihilation. Welson says something very interesting right here. She says, listen to this shit. She says, quote, the sport of hunting animals, in most instances, they have to be black or dark brown fur, in the white supremacy system culture, wherein is the thrill, excitement, and pleasure associated with killing. It's the way in which the collective stays in physical and psychological readiness for killing blacks and other non-white males justifiable homicide, albeit that this obsessive practice may be functioning at the unconscious levels of brain computer activity. Listen to this. Unlike black and other non white people who kill animals for food and shelter purposes, the white collective engages in this activity as obsessive sports and play by using the gun, which is known as a great equalizer, against helpless animals. They attempt to achieve a sense of manhood and security. That's what Dr. Welsing said. Basically, Welsing has said in this system of white supremacy, it's okay for them to kill us because that's just practicing for their defense. Now, if you flip that equation around, you understand why our dear young um, honor student scholar and excellent athlete, brother Carmelo, is being persecuted for defending himself. Because according to Dr. Welsing, a black man is not allowed to defend himself. That act is reserved for the other side of the equation. Go ahead. Can somebody let David up? I keep letting him, and it keeps like it's like error. It won't let me let him up. Go ahead, BJ.
Yo, what's good with y'all? How y'all feeling this good evening?
What's up, brother?
I can't complain. So I came in a little bit, probably about 15 minutes ago. But I was reading, it was, do we have protection under the law? Or protection under the law? One of the things is, as a grassroots organizer in LA, we always put emphasis on black folks having a seat at the table. One of my favorite sayings is, if we don't have a seat at the table, then we always gonna be what's on the menu. And so we can't expect for nobody to give us reparations. We can't expect for nobody to give us freedom. Those are things that if you want and you really truly desire those things, you have to take those things. And how do you take them? America left this huge loophole in their constitution where as now like we're not in the Jim Crow era where we don't have the ability to turn out the outcome of local elections and putting in certain champions, politicians that really represent the people, that really come from where we come from, that really, you know what I'm saying, gonna do it. Now, at the end of the day, working with politicians in LA, I learned a few things along the way. One of the things I learned is that even if the politicians that do care somehow get into office, once they displace that care, in most cases, it's almost like a career suicide because the next election, they are definitely not going to be able to run or hold that seat, should I say. They'll be able to run, but they won't be able to hold that seat. And so my thing is, when we have situations like that, and my prime example, I don't know if you all are too familiar with Gascon. He was the DA down here in LA, and so I know him personally, and I know him fairly well. And one of the things that he always talked about is evening the playing field when it comes to black and brown bodies coming into uh, the courtroom, right? Or trying them just as the same way he would try
He's Hispanic,
white
right?
whites or Hispanics. You said what?
He's Hispanic, right?
Yes, yes,
That's gone.
yes.
Okay.
Cuban.
And he
So,
discussed black and brown bodies.
you said what?
He discussed black and brown bodies needing what?
Actual rehabilitation, right, and not over sentencing. Like I was at a luncheon, like I recorded it. I got it, and this was probably like I want to say a month before his election. So we were all kind of getting together to help support and do grassroots organizing around his the upcoming election, right? So he was totally against. We had Prop 36, which would undo what we all fought for Prop 47, which was to stop you know um, trying criminals for petty theft as felonies, but also if you get caught with drugs, instead of sending you to jail, we would send you to a facility, right? Because of all of the issues that we had around the three strikes law and the war on drugs really hit hard, LA hard. I'm an 80s baby. I'm 40 years old, so I can remember, you know what I mean, the beginning of the 90s and how crazy it was, and having some family members in or on drugs as well. So, um, he was pressing for a lot of the laws and certain different things to change. I actually know some people that I knew personally from my past life when I was out here banging in the streets that he actually helped get free from prison. Like folks that we thought would never be able to come home, folks that got sentenced to life at 16 or 17. And so he had this huge campaign about not having a death penalty, but also not trying uh, minors or youth, should I say, under the age of 25 with life sentences or a death sentence, so to
Well,
speak.
well, our brother Tariq Nasheed kind of talked about that earlier about just following the law and following what we have on the books with fidelity will destroy, the system of inequality that we're dealing with. What I do like about what BJ said is all it really is going to take is our officials to just stand by what's written. We're seeing that right now with that judge who's a conservative, mind you, in the Carmelo case.
Right.
Carmelo's bond was wasn't it $1 million? That's craziness. $1 million for self defense. What does the Eighth Amendment of the Constitution say? I'm glad y'all asked. The Eighth Amendment of the Constitution, which ratified in 1791, what does it do? It prohibits excessive bail, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishments inflicted. That judge stood up, um with all this bullshit I'm hearing about people coming at her, which they need to be prosecuted for doing that, for just saying stuff about her. I That judge is standing up for the Eighth Amendment. That's just only fair. You don't give that child $1 million bond. That's insanity. That's against the Eighth Amendment. So if we basically the situation we're in right now, if we have people just stand up for what's written, um the system's gonna crumble. The
But that's just the same irrational behavior. They don't accept the fact that a black American or a black person can defend themselves. Number one, that's how he got charged in the first place. They don't acknowledge our right to this is typical behavior.
What?
It's just typical.
But see, my point that I'm making is that we can't rely on people that we know are vile and disgusting to determine the outcomes of certain situations. If if we have the ability to say, all right, I can sit on a jury. All right, I'm voting this judge because this judge over sentenced this person. If we have the ability to say, well, we want this district attorney because it's different in a sense of like where you stay at, right? Where you stay at, and if you have the numbers, kind of determine the outcome of local elections. Meaning that if you stay in the area where the population is high, as a higher concentration of Black Americans, it should be Black Americans that should be sitting on those juries. It should be Black Americans that should be sitting in the, what I mean, as the judge in those courtrooms. It should be Black Americans that should be those DAs. And if we organize and strategize enough, that will be the case. And instead of saying that, oh, we want to wait to see what the outcome of this is or that is or this is, that's how we always get fucked on the back end of certain shit because we're literally hoping and waiting for the outcome instead of saying, all right, America, y'all left that loophole, y'all put in the 13th, the 14th, and the 15th Amendment. So we're going to take full advantage of that, and especially where we stay at. One of the reasons why redlining was necessary in this country is because they knew that if they were able to control where people stayed at, then they could control the outcome of certain elections, right? One of the second part of the question is, why do so many people are confused with ethnicity and race? One of the main reasons why is because that's a tool of white supremacy, right? Because if we go by ethnicity, then we're not necessarily the minorities no more. You understand what I'm saying? So they have to bunch up and say, no matter where you come from, if you white, then you white. No matter where you come from, if you black, then you black. But if you go, the more I start to travel outside of the country, I'm just an American. I'm not even, they don't even say you a black American. In America, I'm and don't get it twisted, I'm definitely proud that I'm a black American, but certain things make me question, why is that? Why is it that whenever white folks come to this country, no matter whether it's the second generation, third generation, they automatically kind of somewhat secretly practice their ethnic um, customs, but they denounce them, and then they bunch up into a category of white so they can control the numbers in the population. But we know now that's not even working because they still not producing babies at a higher rate. But but when you look at throughout the course of history, when they had European peasants, you know what I mean, the Irish and the Italians and certain different things like that. But once they felt the necessity to say, hey, we getting low in numbers, we got to bunch up with these folks, and that's exactly what they doing. And so they control the American system that they tried so hard to keep us out of. And what is that? The ability to say, I'm going to put in the right folks to make sure, not to say, oh, we're going to hope that we have protection under the law, but we're going to put in the right representatives. And if your ass not doing your job, and if it's black people that's getting lynched, get the fuck up out of office so we could put somebody else there. That's been the whole game. Everything that these, I hate to say it, but everything that these crackers have done to us historically have been through law, right? When they determine, all right, the outcome of your status as a slave is going to be, what I mean, from your mama, that was put into law. That wasn't like just some hearsay or this or that. That was put into law, that was voted on, and it became what it was until somebody came and changed that law. And so if we understand the dynamics of what this
I'm
country
talking
is
through a mute.
about.
I remind the room that laws are just words on a page. They need to be enforced by people. So we do need our own people to enforce these, and hoping that somebody's going to do the right thing is that's no longer going to work. We have to install our own people, and Dr. Claude Anderson says that's going to take unity, and that's going to take money to pay for our own politicians. We're going to go to David. What's your thoughts on this, David? Can you hear me, David? David going once.
Yes,
I
yes, I can hear you. I'm sorry, I had my mic off.
Oh, you
Can you hear
good?
me?
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay. Hey, I appreciate y'all having this talk tonight. I'm down here in Mississippi,
Uh
and
oh.
when I tell you, I'm down on the coast. When I tell you it's very, very bleak, white people acting extra nice and whatnot, and then you have some of them, they have that conversation about, well, she only did it because of his skin color. And I told one of them, I said, well, let's just say she did do it because of his skin color. I said, how many of y'all have done it because of skin color? I said we can go all the way back to the Dred
Oh
Scott
my
case and
God.
just start listing off judges and the horrible things that white folks have done, not only in other places but right here in Mississippi. Let's talk about it. I think one thing I was listening to you earlier when you was talking about what Sister Frances Cress Welsing was talking about the genetic annihilation part. And I'm telling you, Mississippi has changed a lot. You look around here in Mississippi, 30 years ago, every once in a while, you would see an interracial marriage. Now you go into supermarkets and Walmarts and all these other places, You see old white people that come out of the segregation era pushing mixed babies in these strollers and in the baskets and whatnot, shopping, smiling from ear to ear. So, something is definitely about to go down. I can feel it. You can see it, and they fighting for their survival. They doing everything they can. A lot of these white folks are drugged out. I can go outside of my photography studio and you see white people that's drugged out walking around with suitcases like they're in the airport ready to catch a plane, or they got these grocery baskets full of their personal belongings, living in the woods and living in tents. They doing real bad,
Wow.
and they know they doing real bad, and they know right now a lot of black people, we just not standing for it. And I remember, I think it was Twizzle was talking earlier. Somebody y'all were telling them just like hold it down a little bit. I don't even think we even have to say what we're gonna do. I was thinking about sometimes when we go on the beach in the summertime, you see the birds flying in flocks, and then all of a sudden the birds just they all move in the same direction without any sound or anything. It's like they know when to move and what's going on. I think that's the time that we living in right now, that we know when to move and what's going on, and it's this is just time. Their demise is near. And I just want to land my plane. I appreciate y'all for having this space because I've been wanting to talk about this all damn day.
Yeah. You in Biloxi?
Yes, sir. Down here in
I
Biloxi.
love it down there, man. But yeah, he's right, and that indicates a very you have to respect the position that people are in, and when you back somebody into a corner, you should be expecting some type of reaction. Dr. Francis Cress Welsing said in the same period in which there's been an increasing instance of justifiable homicide, there's also been an increasing enthusiasm for killing helpless animals, making
Mm.
making such hunting location as Potters County, Pennsylvania, world famous. White adult males have been taught by their fathers to kill and destroy helpless animals for sport, and in turn, the next generation of white males is taught the means by which to ensure white genetic survival. Dr. Welsing says all is basically saying all that hunting and that is like practice. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, we need to be really careful out here. Dr. Welsing finally says non-white males may say that they also hunt and enjoy hunting, but obviously hunting doesn't carry the same unconscious, that's the key word, meaning for non-white male as it does for the white male in context of global white supremacy. So, like the brother said, I like that he said that we're living in some interesting times. I just moved from Memphis, and I was shot in Mississippi and in Olive Branch and Horn Lake, and things are changing, and y'all better believe people are not happy about that change. As our sister Wani brought up in another space, I'm paraphrasing you, Wani, but um, the money that the dominant society used to have ain't the same, and they used to rely heavily upon their money and status to achieve a mate, to get a lady. And now that that's not there, you're dealing with frustration. And what did Dr. Francis Quest Welsing say the dominant society has been practicing their whole life? And I'm asking is what's the possibility that they're gonna switch their targets and start taking out their frustration on other targets? I'm just saying.
Remember when the field was leveled, when the white people were over here broke, they took black men and went up into the went up to the Appalachian Mountains. They took these white men, they need money to get women. Repeat, white men need money to get women. If they don't have a bigger paycheck than the other men, they're out of luck. They're out of luck because they're only being chosen because of money. So they should feel very embarrassed that they don't have the charisma, the intelligence, the looks, the strength, the virility, the sensuality to get a woman. If all things were equal, they don't have that to get a woman.
You know what? You are so right. Remember what Jeannie Mai said? She wanted that mandingo, but what did she want? But she married that white man first, and she thought that was security for her because he had the money.
Yeah, how they gonna react when that money ain't there? That's the question.
They're gonna get on drugs and form an incel group and have men going their own way and throw a fit like they're doing right now. Now I wanted to ask BJ a question, but he left. I wanted to because he brought up Prop 47. Prop 47 is basically welfare so that white men can buy meth. Okay? So they get to go into the store with a pillowcase and steal whatever they want and trade that on the sidewalk for meth. There you go. They don't have to get welfare. That's the way. Yeah, they had to create a two-tiered, there's a multiple tiered justice system, first of all. There's immigrants that get to anally probe little children and call it bachabazi. Oh, that's my culture. I can't help it, and they don't get in trouble for it, right? And then there's the stuff they're doing in the UK and in Scandinavia where it's okay to rape women and little girls because they don't know any better. Okay? They're Muslim. They're African. They're whatever. They're Pakistani and they need to groom our children. They don't know any better than that. So we can't really bust their chops like we are going to bust our own people for doing it. You see, it's a two-tiered, three-tiered, four-tiered system. They even tried to install something out here, a homeless court. That means that homeless people don't have to pay fines. We already have that where if they break a driving law or if they break a parking law, they don't get a ticket. If I park incorrectly, I'm getting a ticket. If a homeless person parks their trailer or their motorhome incorrectly, they don't. They already have these laws. And I don't know how they keep track of it, but they know who to give the ticket to. They have different laws. I have a friend that I grew up with that we were friends back when I was maybe 15, but she, spiraled into hell. She is above the law. She's 007. She can kill if she wants to kill. She's not good enough to go to jail. Yeah, that's a fact. She breaks every law on the book. She beats people up. Homeless people out here beat people up and they don't get in trouble. The cop comes out and says, "Oh, they're homeless. They're not going to get in trouble." Doesn't even take a report. People are on the ground bleeding. One person was stabbed in the forehead. Didn't get in trouble. Not at all. Didn't even take a police report. If I have never seen crime actually in my face as much as I've seen crime in Santa Monica. Like literal crime happening while I'm looking. You hear about crime. You might see it on a video on YouTube, but I actually saw it regularly and nobody took a police report every time to the point of murder. They allowed someone to murder someone and they said it was vandalism. I'll never forget that. I'll never forget what they do out here to keep the crime numbers down. But anyway, wasn't BJ up here? Oh yeah, BJ,
Yeah, yeah,
did you
I'm
want
right
to
here.
did
I'm
you
right
want to
here.
speak about Prop 47? Because I
So
know that you were mentioning it. I wanted to you to hear my point of view on Prop 47.
no, I totally get what you're saying. Um, my stance on that is, as far as Prop 47 goes, s- s- crime is going to be there, especially when you have poverty. Poverty and crime runs hand in hand together. That's one thing. But as far as Prop 47 goes, it was necessary because in California and LA particular, if you got caught with cocaine, which really poor people couldn't afford cocaine, if you got caught with cocaine, you will do 6 months. But if you got caught with a rock, you would do 3 years, 2 years, 18 months, depending on whatever, You know what I mean? Or if it was your first or second or third offense. And so what we start seeing and hearing and working with lawyers that would take certain cases pro bono and raising money and funds, what we were hearing was it was literally a license for police and the criminal justice system in this region to over sentence black folks, and they were doing it at an alarming rate.
Yeah.
So Prop 47 was put into place. Now I stay roughly, which we would say, in the trenches in South Central. When I go to the grocery store, we have Rob's Market. On that, it's one aisle that's like locked up, but those are like literally all the essentials, deodorant, sanitary napkins, all of those things that people would steal if they didn't have opportunity to be able to make an honest dollar. Now, I get what you're saying as far as, um, you know, crime being at a high alarming rate, but that's because of other issues as far as economics that haven't been addressed as well. But I would say Prop 47 is a lot of upside to it, but it did have some of its down issues. We just wanted to make sure that black folks wasn't getting over sentenced for drug offenses, while our other counterparts was
No,
getting caught with
I
drugs and
understand
getting
that
lighter
because
sentences.
people were stealing little BS and getting in trouble, right? But
Yeah,
it kind of turned it not kind of it literally turned into welfare for white boys out at the beach. Because what they do is they get a pillowcase and just go steal a bunch of stuff and then sell it for more meth. And it's pretty I don't know what to do about it. I mean, can it be done another way? Because that's not working really. It's first off, it's very alarming to the people that work at the store, and to be told that you just get robbed and you just call the insurance company, or you're getting beat up. Oh, they can't, you can't get them in trouble. Just take, we won't take a police report, just go wash your face. And they're doing crime. These are not black men ever. I didn't even see a Hispanic man do it. I saw all white men doing these crimes.
Well,
yeah,
I think
no,
there
no,
goes your answer, because as Dr. Claude Anderson identified, that's what how the 13th Amendment was perverted. He says that quote, the 13th Amendment contained an exception clause that cleared a way for nearly a century of involuntary servitude because blacks had no income alternatives. That decriminalization of um black men had nothing to do with justice. It was about exploitation and wanting. I think you're looking at a system that's refusing to use white males as slaves or indentured servants under the 13th Amendment. That's where all these fucking exceptions are coming up. I remind y'all that according to Chris Hedges, Victoria's Secret is made in prison for free by criminals. I mean, by not criminals. I'm sorry, wrong word. By people who are convicted of a crime, either falsely or it's there's a financial incentive to putting people in jail. It's not about justice. They spitting all this bullshit like it's about right or wrong. No, it's about free Victoria's Secrets. It's about allegedly McDonald's uniforms being made in prison. You know what I'm saying? It's about exploitation. That's the name of the game. You understand?
And then, and the way that they're doing it's like, again, it's just based on whims. Like, I don't feel like arresting this person. They're kind of, quirky and white, and he's just stealing stuff and beating people up. I don't want to file a police report. I don't want to put him in jail. And they're going around doing that. And of course, they don't do that with black men.
Nope.
A black man could be standing somewhere with strange posture and end up in jail. I've seen people go to jail for having residue of drugs. Um, so they are just running around here giving white boys a mega pass because we have a huge drug problem in America. And you see it, you can see it in almost every state. Some place with a lot of white people bent over, looking crazy, looking like zombies. And now they have to address that by giving them a form of welfare or a way to survive, but they're only letting them get money to get more drugs. So what are they trying to do to these people? Are they trying to make a separate class of people that are zombies walking around? Because we seem to have them started out here. I'm gonna go on a limb and say it started here because I've been seeing it, but now I can see it everywhere,
Yeah,
everywhere in every state.
yeah, like the gentleman said, it's going on in Mississippi. You know what I'm saying?
Right. That is so strange.
Yeah.
I don't even associate it with a place like Mississippi.
But that what Wani said goes into the topic. What Wani just said is not equal protection under the law. Crime is a crime. If you're stealing out of a fucking store, you need to be convicted. But I'm hearing Wani say that the dominant society stealing gets an exception, which is what this space is all about.
Well, BJ was explaining that this Prop 47, it's not so that white guys can steal stuff. It's so that people could steal up to a certain amount, not go to jail, not have these nitpicky crimes. It's kind of addressing the fact that um, there's, poverty and people have to survive. It's kind of like a weird way of helping people. They need to be helped in another way, not allowing them to steal legally and causing disruptions in the stores and breeding crime. They're helping in a backward way. Yes, those people are surviving every day because of the thefts, but that's not a good way to live for anybody. And they're just creating more chaos with that bill. I don't really have an answer of what to do. um, Homelessness is not what we used to think it was, where your house burned down and your wife left you and you got depressed and you ended up on the street because of a series of bad events. Homelessness has become a lifestyle. It's chronic homelessness where even if you get someone to give you some housing, you don't really respond to it. You have become a feral human. You want to be outside. I know. Like I said, my best friend growing up, she is a feral human. Now that's not nice to say, but it's true. But she has Section 8. She subleases her Section 8. She will never live inside. Why? I don't know. You could say mental illness, you could say a whole lot of things. We'll never know what's going on. They don't want to live inside. Now, I understand why they don't want to live in shelters because there's more crime in the shelter than on the corner. So they don't want that. But there's different issues with people not being able to maintain a home and people just wanting to be out. They don't want to have a home,
Wow.
they want to be
Well,
outside.
no, you said something that just, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I just wanted to bring home a point. And not to even play devil's advocate, but we have to I'm a person that goes to, like, I want to understand, well, why is this way? Why is this that way? Of course, the homeless population is different. I don't know if you too familiar with when Reagan closed all of the
Yeah, he started
mental
it.
health facilities.
Yes,
And so
exactly.
in California, it's a little, the homeless population is different because we don't really have that much mental health resources. So in most cases, they just thrown out on the street, and then you know what I mean. It's just like a revolving door, or kind of like a never ending cycle. And the only reason why I say that is because I do a lot of volunteer work, on Skid Row, and I go downtown, and some of them are some cool people, but a lot of them are off their rockers because they're not taking their medication, right? And so, regardless if they have mental health issues or not, I still see my black brothers and sisters, and so I try my best to help them get off drugs and get off the streets and get resources. And but at the end of the day, I understand that living in this country and living in this society, sometimes a lot of us are not mentally sound to be able to walk the shoes of being a black person in this society. And so I try my best to help those lost souls and try to help them get into shelters and get into housing and get food and different things like that. But listening to a lot of their stories, I have compassion, and it made me have understanding of where they came from. A lot of us, like again, like I said, I'm a product of South Central, so a lot of this population between the ages of 35 and probably 50 are really crack babies. If we being real, you know what I'm saying. A lot of them raised each
No,
other, and so
I get that. I know I'm from the
and
area
so
too.
you know, so I
The
and
other
I
thing
just
is
land my plane there.
the other thing is the medication that you mentioned. There's no such thing as medication for these things. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Uh, there's okay, they may do better on okay.
Side effects.
Most of these medications are tranquilizers. So why in the hell would somebody want to be tranquilized and live on the street? You need to be awake to live outside. Okay? So this goes against self-survive. This goes against survival, and plus a lot of those medications do not work. They're pseudo. That's a pseudo arm of science. They have produced zero cures, and it's all theories. And they don't take that medication because it makes them feel weird. And they're right. It makes you feel weird. It does. And it's definitely some of their issues is going to need to be tranquilized. It's not a good idea to be outside tranquilized. So I really don't know what the answer is on that. And that's why we have all the homelessness and the suffering, because it's a vicious circle. It is a vicious circle, and just it's not what we used to think of it. Like we thought people had hardships. No, this is really a whole thing. It is a whole thing that has just ballooned out here. We don't have mental health care. There's no such thing. We can't help people like this. And we tried to house people, and everybody got raped. So they can't even be trusted to house people like we used to. What did they do? They gave people lobotomies, they did experiments on them, everybody got molested, treated bad, bed sores. You know, I don't even know what the answer is to that.
I think that that should be a real discussion. Like as far as Black Americans, like what do we do with our brothers and sisters that do suffer from mental health issues? Like what would be you know a outcome that can be sufficient that they can what I mean be citizens and you know what I mean in Black society. Like what? Because I don't.
There's no cure for mental illness. That's the problem. That's what I was just saying. Medication doesn't work, and they are not in a position to medicate themselves. And if they are, they're going to be tranquilized out on the streets. Housing people didn't work. I mean, they had nothing but pure horror stories from mental institutions. So we have two options: drug people, tranquilize them, or house them. And we tried both of them. And that's why they deinstitutionalized everybody on the streets. All those people went to the mission. And that's why that area in LA looks the way it does, because they're near the mission.
All this trauma, all these problems coming from Germanic lineage. Yeah. Afro POV, what's on your mind?
Yes, family. I'm sorry, I'm fighting a cold. Thank you all for having me. I wanted to point out something that I actually run a chain of childcare centers, or my family and I run a chain of childcare centers throughout Northeast Ohio. And I wanted to point out an interesting fact that you all said earlier that the 12th, 13th, and the 14th Amendment, or those amendments, was somehow applicable to corporations. I wanted to point out the fact that immigrants, when they come in, they get help underneath the EIN numbers that corporations also fall under, and not to give that's probably how they are getting these rights to funneled through all of these guaranteed loans and things of that nature. I'm sure they need a 9-digit number similar to a social security number, and one of those numbers, I'm gonna land my plan right now behind that and say one of those numbers is directly tied to the EIN number established by the taxation department, taxation through the federal government.
Yeah, I'm not gonna argue with that. What's on your mind, housing?
Hi, housing.
Hey, hello everyone. Wani, Nikki the
I'm
God.
southern right
What's
now.
going on,
You
brother?
making fun of me?
Everybody's cooking. Everybody's cooking. Most of the things I wanted to speak on, everybody touched on it. And Professor, I wanted to say you was cooking in that other room. I don't know why that shut down. You was cooking. Oh God, you was cooking. Anyway, the dominant
They had
society,
connection issues.
yeah, the dominant society, lower class is being hit hard. That's why you see him out there in those places stealing and doing all kind of stuff. And be mindful, there's a lot of them that's not doing drugs. They just hurting. The pockets are hurting, but they get a pass. They could go in the store, rack up and come out and do it repeatedly. You know, we had that lady, a heavy set lady, living in a beautiful house over there, and she running the racketeering, had all kind of girls stealing all kind of stuff. They don't talk about it no more. And just over there in Australia, a guy killed himself because he didn't have enough money to take care of his family. So it's not just touching the black community. And when it comes to double standards, protection of the law, we know that we get the low hand of the stick. We always do. And is it fair? No, it's not fair. We just got to, stay in the fight. We got to stay in the fight. And I salute the judge who lowered that bail. And one thing about, you know, these white people, when you touch them a little, they lose their mind. But with us, we've been dealing with stuff for so many years and thousands of years. We've been dealing with a lot of stuff. Well, not thousands too. I could say that too. But you get my point. We just not gonna fall. A lot of people on that side of the sticks, if you touch them, like prick them or something, they lose their mind. And I'm laying my plane there.
Yeah.
But
Oh, go ahead, one.
I was just going to say this Prop 47 law seems so selective because think about it. If I'm in the drugstore getting some shampoo and a white boy comes, because this has happened, white man comes in with a pillowcase, starts shoving stuff he wants in the pillowcase, and everybody's supposed to just sit there and take it, and then he just leaves. But let's be real. If I did that in the store, I would get arrested. Let's be real. The security guard would jump on my back.
Or gun
So what?
down.
Right. I no. They know that they're doing that for certain people. Because that's not true. It's welfare for white drug addicts. It is. They're not going to let me go into the store and steal a $900 dress and walk out. They're going to chase me out of the store and attack. So what are we talking about? What is this law really?
And over here, Wani, they stealing big time. They stealing big time. And if they do get caught, they'll bring them into that security room and say, don't come back no more.
But do
But
you have a Prop 47? You don't have a type of Prop 47
no,
where
I
they can
never even
steal
heard
up
of
to.
that over here.
That's where you can steal up to a certain amount, and but
Nah,
I
they don't
feel like
got
it's selective.
that's not in New York. Hell no.
They wear
Hell
y'all
no.
out.
Yeah,
That's
if
the
it's
first time.
under $1,000, if it's under $1,000, they just let them get away.
They're not
Supposedly,
letting us. Me and
sup-
Stacy
Yeah.
would be hit
Where,
in the head with a
suppose
gun.
where is
supposedly
this in New
it's
York?
It's California.
California.
Supposedly, it was because they were tired of all these. I guess I don't know if they was supposedly overworked, or they're saying, "Oh, people are getting locked up for these small little thefts." So now, they passed a law where if it's under $1,000, they you don't get prosecuted or whatever. But
Mm.
now the stores are losing money because it messes with their bottom line. Then they have to raise prices, or now they can't afford, like, because I work at the Rainbow, and it when people steal, we can't do nothing about it. So I don't even know why we have a security. Who knows? Because he don't stop them, he don't do nothing. They just walk on out the store and look at us crazy. We mark it down, tell them how much it was worth that we lost, and then at the end of the year, um after inventory, they check the shrinkage, and then they either got to cut hours, or it just dumbs
Have
it's
you
so
gotten the guy?
stupid.
Have you gotten the guy with the pillowcase that comes in? Do you have that theme?
No, but we did. You know what? I wasn't at work that day, but I did hear because there was one guy. They say he had been in there a couple times. He comes in, scopes out the store, and you know what? It's a white meth head dude. He'll come in,
Yeah.
scope the store. Now he did come in. I heard one time, I wasn't there, but he grabbed a handful of stuff and he did a grab and run. He grabbed a handful of clothes
Why
and
did
ran
he
out the
run? There's
store.
no reason to run. He can browse.
He ran out the store.
And
Um,
he and you can't touch him. You
no,
can't
they
do
can't do
nothing.
No,
nothing. No, you
no,
can't.
Nah,
they
that's not happening
terrorize.
here. You going to jail here.
No, they terrorize these little clerks in the store. I go in the store 'cause, like, I might miss one of the thefts, and these girls are in there trembling. They cannot understand what, and they can't do anything about it. They'll steal the little charity tin. They'll do anything, and more than that, but I can't say it. And these girls looked like they've been through hell. I was like, this is not the kind of young people's job that we used to have. These
when
people are
they
getting
started going
trashed.
when they started going into them Walmarts and some of these other stores, or going into these jewelry stores, are doing them smash and grabs and tearing up people's stuff and grabbing all that money jewelry. Now they talking about maybe they should revisit this law that they passed. I was like,
I don't
yeah, because they
believe.
running up in your neighborhoods now, and you
Right.
don't
I
like
don't
that.
believe
Man, I used to work at the Walmarts. They used to get active in there. Not just the white
that.
folks, the little hoodlums too, doing runouts with the PlayStations, bikes, clothes,
They
food.
don't
Man,
have to run out here. They can browse, take what they want, put it in their cart, and roll it the hell up out of there.
Now, in New York, they ain't playing that up in here. You going to jail. They
No, they
don't
don't
care.
go to jail here.
Yeah, they
If
don't
you
care what
call the
color you.
police,
One
you
thing I
might go to
know,
jail for calling the police.
one thing I know about Walmart's up here, they're not playing no games. They real serious about shoplifting over here in New York.
Well, they're not serious about it here.
And
In
what
fact,
you call that
they
that
get mad at the people that call the police.
Wani? What you call that law again? Prop 40 what?
Prop 47. Plus, when I have called the police because of people, white men exposing themselves in front of children, the what they do is they don't want to touch the homeless person. So the homeless person pretty much is a 007. They could do whatever they want. And they do. They expose themselves, they pull their pants down. And every time I've seen a cop come out, they take those purple rubber gloves out of their pocket, put the gloves on, and then look over at me like, I'm not going to touch him. They put rubber gloves on to look? Is that what we're doing?
Yeah. But you know what that law is? That law that's designed for white people.
It
Even though
is.
even though, it falls under all groups, but it's basically designed for white people.
Yeah,
They
because it's
actually
like, well, we don't want to come arresting them in the cheap neighborhoods. That stuff ain't worth nothing anyways. As long as they don't come uptown to where we at, then y'all okay, y'all can handle it. Just get
no,
insurance on your stuff. They don't care.
they're in the good area.
Oh,
They're
they starting to go there, yeah. Now,
They're at the beach, at the tourist stores, robbing people in front of the tourists.
that's
You
a
know,
oh, that's a
hey,
shame.
Wani, listen, I remember I remember when I went to California a few years ago, right? And I did the Hollywood Boulevard. So I'm walking, and this guy, I think he asked me for some change or something. So I was about to give him $1, but like three other guys rolled up on me. I said, hold up, time the fuck out. Give me 25 feet. Give me 25, all y'all. And I was talking to the guy, and all those guys was from New York.
What?
Yes, it was four people, a female and four other dudes. I said, what are y'all doing over here? Hey, we just got stuck over here, man. Yeah, they was in Hollywood.
Well, they
They
could easily go home. They have the right to rob the
no, they've been
stores
over here for.
blind.
I talked to them one. They said they've been over here for the last 15 years.
Oh, they could steal for every day
Scamming.
and pay their rent.
Yeah, it was crazy. I'm like, oh my god. Now I seen, you know, I didn't know they had that in California. I thought, I mean, I know they. I'm talking about in Hollywood.
It's all over.
Yeah, I see it now, and I see it.
But
Because they got.
I don't think it's universal. I really don't think that they have separate laws for separate people. If they see you are clean cut middle class, you're getting a ticket. Not for stealing. I'm talking about like parking, doing jaywalking. They're going to give you a ticket. But if a white bummy looking person is jaywalking or parking wrong or doing anything, he's not getting a ticket. They're like, oh no, I'm not wasting my time on him. He doesn't have any money. They're sizing you up. Do you have money to pay for a fine? Then I'll give you a fine. If you look like a bum, I'm not going to give you a fine. It is the same thing with that Prop 47. If you look like a middle class housewife and you're snatching stuff, I believe you would get in trouble, even if they had to scan your face and chase you to your house. I don't believe they're letting middle class people go in the store and just steal like that, but they're just ignoring all the homeless white people, letting them do it. I had to move away from that area because it was too much crime. And like, I'm not supposed to see the crime right in my face. Somebody threw a chair through the Starbucks window just for fun. And it was a chair stuck in the glass. They're just running amok.
Yeah, they're going for the money. Whoever has the money, that's who they go after. And that's the law. That's it's greed. It's the law all the way around. Any way the state can get your money, that's who they're going to go after. That's just like if you're in family court, people always say, "Oh, they always give the child to the mother." No, they always give the child to the person with the least amount of money. Whoever makes the most money ends up being the non-custodial parent because they want to get paid. And that's what happened to me. My son's
Wow.
father quit his job and got on welfare when he got custody of my son. And they went after me and I was paying almost like 650 something dollars in child support for one child. This was back in 2006 and I was only working a customer service a bank um call center job. I'm like, I don't
That's
make that
another
much money.
scam.
I had to move back in with my mom because of that every month. And this man was not only was he getting my money, he was on welfare getting that money. He put my son on social security. How he was able to do that, I don't know. His mother, she was from Ghana, helped him. She used to read a lot of law books, helped him scam, that's what they do. And then after I got laid off, I went back to school, saw him at the same college in line in the financial aid, waiting to get a financial aid check. Okay, so you got four sources of income and I only have one, and you still collecting money from me? Are you freaking kidding me? But
Hey,
California
sis,
is greedy.
can I
They don't
interrupt you for
care.
a minute?
Go ahead.
You know, they have these pocket programs for immigrants. That's how he's able to do what he does. I call them pocket program. They set up just for people like him and others like him.
They could go and apply for financial funds, our tax dollar, with no problem.
Yeah, well, I would like to ask the space to just reflect upon the history of this country. Foundational Black Americans have brought the wealth into all these people that are these European immigrants. They were all poor and starving. They were a peasant class with very few exception. And we're the ones that brought the wealth. And now that we're turning our back on the idea of being exploited to provide them with a status of nobility, in my view, what I've been hearing in this room is they are returning from California to Mississippi back to their original status when they got here. Bobby Hemmett used to say something very powerful. He said, "You'll know the end when you know the beginning." And why Bobby say that? He said because history is circular. Um, so it looks like we're returning back to the origin of where we started. you know.
It's almost like when you're in a situation where you're so people are so used to running over you all the time, and I always think about how my grandmother used to call me a yes girl, and she's just like, you're a yes girl. She said you don't have to do stuff, anything you don't want to do. You can say no. She said she would tell me it's okay to say no sometimes. And when I started saying no, then all of a sudden, like, my mom, my sisters, or my sister, and sometimes my brother, whoever was so used to me just going out of my way to do whatever they wanted, now I was selfish. Oh, you're just being selfish. I'm like, so you, I don't ask you for anything. And if you do something, you don't really do anything for me, or I can't ask you to do anything for me. Anytime you say no, I'm like, okay, well, you just didn't feel like doing it, or you just can't do it. But let me say no one time. Now all of a sudden a crime is being committed because you're so used to me saying yes. And I feel like that's this situation with us. They're so used to us doing all the work and getting nothing for it, and them benefiting off of what we do. Now that we finally go, you know what? No, no. Now all of a sudden we're committing, this is a crime to y'all, or we're the bad guys. No. And it's like, get it yourself. Get it your damn self. Because we've been doing it all this time. And this time it's our turn to collect. We need to collect
Correct.
on all this hard work we've been doing. It's our turn.
All right, so we're nearing the end of the space. I wanted to touch on the last portion. Why are people confused about ethnicity and race? I wanted to let y'all know that Dr. Claude Anderson said something very interesting. Dr. Anderson said that the word race came from the idea of the new world. I hate that term, but I keep having to say it. But Dr. Anderson said Europeans were on a race with each other to get free unearned benefits and free wealth at our expense. In other words, the Spaniards, the English, the Irish, the French. People leave the French out. The Italians, the Russians, and some Russians, immigrants, German immigrants, were on a race to get over here to take advantage of this new concept called whiteness. So I'm gonna go with Dr. Claude Anderson that race. What is a race? What does it mean when two cars race? That means it's a competition between two or more entities trying to win. But in order for there to be a winner, you have to have a what? A loser. Um, so with that being said, Wani, why are people confused about ethnicity and race? What's the confusion?
I think the topic is too long and we need to have more discussion about it tomorrow, but it's pretty interesting because white people think the Queen of England was English. They don't seem to understand the ethnicity doesn't change because you're ruling or because you live over there, and they're very very confused, but they seem to see it one way because they'll say like, well, I just moved here from Jamaica, I'm a black American, but I don't get to be a Jamaican. When I go over there, I'm just a random person on vacation when I go over to Jamaica. So they understand that I can't be their ethnicity, but they get to be ethnicities that they like. I remember listening to Naomi Campbell be described as an English. Oh, she's an English actress and model. I'm like, what? No, she's Jamaican. How did she become English? English is an ethnicity. She's a British citizen, but she's not British. So we'll have to talk about that in detail because we're going to go into these different people's ethnicities and see how they selectively feel about these things and how they just ignore it when it's inconvenient and then focus on it when they want to. I see Men's finally. Did you wake up, Men's?
We'll get men's last words.
Marvelous, marvelous. What's going on? Now I've been listening the whole time. I was just doing taxes and everything.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I had my headphones on, and then I came up, and then y'all were talking, and I went and put my headphones back on again, and then because I heard, noticed I got dropped down. I was waiting, but there was one point someone, I think somebody did mention my name, but I was talking to somebody trying to get this information and finish their taxes. All right, so listen, I listened to a lot of the submissions. Equal protection under law. I think someone kind of hinted at it, but I don't think they actually said it. If we talk as far as pertaining to Black Americans or America, yes, there is equal protection under the law. Like we are a protected class. However, we're, and I'm not blaming us. I'm just saying what it is. I think that we do fall short in enforcing the equal protection under the law, and I think that there has been different things that's happened in events where we have disconnected in utilizing um, certain positions of power, and in some of those positions is filing reports and even with the FBI and all that stuff. Like we're against that. I still am like kind of it's difficult. It's pretty hard to accept that, but it's true. A lot of people, what do? They utilize all of these different services. They file a lot of reports, and we do ultimately do in some degree when it's extreme, when it's extremities. But we don't use it the way other people do. Immigrants obviously massively use all the different levels and layers. Like I was just looking at a video about this immigrant who shot a black kid in the back, and who thought he was shoplifting and everything. There was another one that chased a black kid with a gun, and he ended up jumping off and I think killing himself. One incident was in South Carolina. I forgot what the other incident was, but we don't utilize the Constitution as much as we should. As much as we are constitutionalists, there's certain degrees of power that we don't actually, embed in practice. Then, the next question is, why are people confused about ethnicity and race? Well, globally, race is, it changes. What race is here and what is defined here is not how it's defined in other places. That's why I've always and ultimately, for the longest amount of time, years before I even came onto social media, I used to tell people like, anytime I had to cover conversation with other people, when you're like, "What are you?" whatever, and they answered in a race, which happened very rarely, but has happened. I'd be like, "What does that tell me about you? Like, what are you trying to tell me?" I say, "What are you?" because I hear an Italian accent. I just want to verify that I know it's Italian, and you say I'm white. So why do they do that? Because they want to hide behind the race. Same thing the Nigerians and Jamaicans do now with black. They want to hide behind the race. And but ultimately, what is it that black Americans specifically confused about ethnicity and race? Well, it's because as far as the government is concerned, the government does not recognize, prior. Now they're conflating both to be, the same category, right? But years ago, they did not recognize us as a separate ethnic group. They didn't recognize anybody besides Hispanic and non-Hispanic. So now, when the conversation is being had, the confusion, and this is particular to Black Americans, I would also say that these the old whites are confused. The Not the new ones, the immigrants, they're not confused. You know what I'm saying? They know intentionally where they came from and everything. But these old whites want to be American and want to be like the original so bad that they have literally either miseducated their children, or their children who know that their roots are Germanic or et cetera, et cetera, right? They will say that they're white because they don't want to say that they're not of this land. They want to say they're what? White American, or white is equal to American. So white automatically what implies that you're American. They don't want to say no.
English,
Huh?
English colonist.
Right, right. And so, and I heard you talk when you was about to go into your the Queen of England spill, because I heard that conversation. I thought that was dope. But then we talk about Black Americans, right? And what we have to accept is that as Black Americans, right? If we talk about socially, yes, we are ethnically um, defined. Like, what I'm saying, how we've used race, how race was placed on us, and how we elevated it. There's a point in history, and I've read this and I've played these narratives where there were people, newly freed people, in accounts, and they said they would rather be called different terms other, and also in history, black was derogatory. There was a point in time they'd rather be called Negro than black. See, a lot of people don't like, and there was also the freedmen narratives and the emancipated slaves, and they had these narratives, thousands of them, thousands. I was actually playing a lot of them the other day, about 100, over 100 of them, and some of them were saying that they do not want to be called or labeled anything that was used during secession times, and they said they would prefer to be called freedmen. Some of them said they would prefer to be called Negro. Later in time, I played this maybe about 3 weeks ago. There was a group of people saying they'd rather be called Afro American. But ultimately, what has transpired in history is that the racial categories and terms that all was associated to some degree to a derogatory meaning, like black and Negro, and how they associate that with, later with the Southern word, y'all know what I'm talking about, the ER. Um, Ultimately, and African American, they love that one because it takes you out of America. It doesn't allow you to say you're American. It basically dictates or resorts to this idea that you're not of this land. So you're from Africa, right? Which is some way somewhat true, but not ultimately true, because it's just a portion of your lineage. It's not the complete picture, which is not something that I gravitate to, but it is part of our history. So with all of that said, the confusion is that you do have people who, when in discussion, will talk to somebody else who says they're Black American for one reason. Another person says they're Black American because they're racially black, right? Because racially black means that you have African descent, right? And that's how the government defined that racially. And then they attach to America because they have American citizenship. And then you have the Black American that uses it as a social identifier, social ethnic identifier, because of all of the history that's up under that. So that's where the confusion comes into play. Now, what Black Americans have to understand is that at this moment in time, the way we use Black American is a social ethnic identifier. It's not an official classification like how they officially classify race and define it. And I'm done.
I feel like we're very confused about the word black. And
Exactly.
I feel that I think we're too strong to be chased away from that term. They did want to chase us away, but think about the other people. All of these terms are simply to describe people. Like they called gypsies because they thought they were from Egypt. Simple. They were in India. They thought they were from Egypt. They tried to other them. The new incoming people wanted to other them. Where are you from? Where are you from? Egypt? All of a sudden, because the incoming people didn't like them, they became up, you know, the outcasts. They became outsiders. And so gypsy over time became negative. Oriental was simply a term to describe people and describe the Orient, Oriental rugs. It wasn't negative, but because over time they said it in a negative way towards mostly Chinese people, it became negative. So I'm not going to be chased away from terms because somebody is angry, because that same person is always angry. And they're not being chased away from white, and I'm not going to be chased away from black. But when we talk about, we'll talk about these terms again because we always beat ourselves up and say that we have too many terms or that we're changing our name, and we have had a bunch of name um, issues. But yeah, when we look at the different types of names that other people have had, and the different identities that just the Germanic people have had, different identities. Go ahead, Mince.
100% agree. 100% agree. Many people that me and you have been affiliated with, you remember how hard we used to go on Black American. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know what's up. You're day one. That's Wanda Don. And she got bodies. She got bodies, all right? And if you was around, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Me and Wanda Don used to host rooms with hundreds of people and get into this dispute. And we'll be sitting there telling them, lining up information, artifact, history, heritage after like line after line, constantly. We would even be talk about like every day was something new because it was funny is that we didn't even regurgitate our own information, right, Wani? We always come up
Because they
with
were
new,
fighting. They were
new,
attacking so bad on Clubhouse that
Yep.
Wani was fighting
yes.
back.
And people be thinking that Twitter is like, oh, more. No, man, Twitter is cake. This is nothing. This is nothing. In fact, most of the people that came over here starting trouble ran from what we were doing. This is before the majors and all of that. Like, this is how far back we was doing this shit. You know what I'm saying? We met under doing this stuff. But I just wanted to throw that in there because I am in 100% agreement that we shouldn't be chased away from anything because ultimately the question that always comes up, right? That final question is, tell me a group of people that took what was given to us, right, and made it into something else and lapped on history and plethora of like accolades and accomplishments and achievements and progress as fast and as much as we did, and was still calling ourselves the same thing. We took every single word that was casted on us, elevated. We elevated black into a social ethnic category. That cannot be disputed. We did elevate Negro into a positive social category. Ultimately, we cannot overlook when we were being called darky, mulatto, black, and Negro during those periods of times. And that's also why those are very much ours because we were called that in this country. So when you come to America and you want to say, oh, well, Sudan means land of the blacks, and you remember this stuff. You see how I remember this stuff? Uh, y-
Mhm.
y-
But
Is
again,
it,
they
We
is
never
it,
pre we,
called
we
themselves
pre-exist
black.
that. But
is it,
and
is
and
it,
even how we used it. So I'm gonna land with this. I do agree with that. I do agree with that. You know, And even to throw the word freedman in there, right? Because we're talking about not like we're not talking about new names. Freeman is not a new name. We are going we are going through the process of reclaiming. That's it's reclaiming, right? Freedman is a very powerful word because as
Excuse
a
me.
freedman, you were is somebody trying to talk?
Yes.
Yeah.
Can I
William,
please?
Yeah,
Can I
we're
finish
gonna
what
we're
I'm
gonna
saying,
con-
please?
we're
hold
gonna we're
on.
gonna continue this.
Oh, who's that? The host? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was just letting you know we're
No,
gonna
it's
continue this
this guy,
tomorrow. But
Malik.
but
I just wanted to. I just wanted to say
No,
one
it's not your
thing.
That's the
turn.
voice I'm
It's
hearing.
not
no,
your turn to
men's.
talk. Men's is
Oh,
still talking, sir. So
oh,
please
I'm
mute
sorry.
yourself.
Please forgive me.
Go ahead, man.
So when we talk about reclaiming any discussion, and this is not about the name, what they call that shit, name wars or what was the term they use?
Name banging.
Name banging. This ain't name banging. This is true history. You can take it as how you want it, but it's not name banging. When we talk about freedmen, I want people to listen and read the freedmen narratives. You go to Library of Congress, you can find over thousands. You can go to emancipated slaves when they were freed. And one thing that you'll find consistent is that when these people became freedmen, when these people was emancipated, that as freedmen they had the ability to seek and they did seek out education. There was narratives that said that education was what brought them freedom. They even used Frederick Douglass quote that a educated man is unfit to be a slave. They said that that was one of the enrichments that they were able to obtain. And the second thing they said they did was to go find their family. And what are we doing now? We are trying to reconnect. So when we talk about the word freedman, it's not just to me about political classification and to get for reparations. It's also a word that was defined and used after you obtain freedom and quote unquote access to your liberty, right? And you were able to do exactly what you wished, which at that time people were very big on education and reconnecting their families and reconnecting with their people. That was something they were free to do. And I feel like that's the battle that we have today. That's the battle we have today. Look at what we're doing. We're reconnecting. So when it comes down to the confusion, there's also an emotional portion of that as well. There's people that are in love with what we have done under Black and what we have done under Negro, and even some people of what we have done under African American, and some people even what was done under mulatto and colored. Very rarely I've heard anybody talk about colored, but that's also something that they preferred to be called at that time as well. They had preferred to be colored. They didn't want to be called Black or Negro. So I say that the confusion is those multiple things. It's emotions and to some degree, and for some people, it's the misunderstanding of how race was used by the government and now the OMB, and how ethnicity has never been identified when it comes down to Black Americans. We have never had
Yeah.
a Black American ethnicity recognized by the
Yeah, we're
government.
gonna continue this conversation tomorrow. Wanda, you were gonna
Okay.
say something.
I was just going to say, colored was their attempt to acknowledge that we're a mixed group of people, just like the colored people over in South Africa. So it's the same thing. We rejected the term and chose black and, have the music and the black pride and the black power to go behind it. But we'll talk about it tomorrow.
Oh yeah,
We'll have a room
yeah,
about
we're
it.
gonna this is a lot to unpack, and I think we need to continue this topic tomorrow. Um, I really enjoyed this room. It's very powerful, actually. Um, Wanda, did you have any last thoughts?
No. Malik Fard, are you going to come back tomorrow?
Malik, you want to have a quick comment?
Malik Fard.
Yes, I'm here, and I want to say I thank you all for inviting me on. And the quick comment is maybe when I come back tomorrow, I will have something to say about who black people really are because people can call us what they want to call us and they can call us what they made us. But according to what I know who we are. So therefore, that will settle that. So I'll come back tomorrow.
Oh,
Maybe
Lord.
we can talk about it.
I don't know. Sounds suspect.
Oh
Professor, man, you should
boy.
let him. I don't want to go
Yeah,
to bed with that on
let
my
him.
head, man. You
Miz
just
is
let
No,
him say what
correct.
he's gonna say.
Miz
There's
is
no,
correct.
no secrets about our
no,
ethnicity.
no,
We
no,
know what our. This is not
no,
1946 when people get to go do pseudo stuff. Oh, we're all a bunch of such and such from here. We
no, no.
know
The,
where we are.
What do you think
You
you're gonna say?
can't.
Israelite?
the,
You
More?
can't
What?
make
no,
What?
no,
stuff
no,
up anymore. Do
no.
you
Professor,
guys
give
get
him two
that?
minutes.
Okay.
Malik
No,
Bart.
no, no,
Malik
no.
Malik
Before
Bart.
you before
Malik
you
Bart.
What,
What is
say
your
it.
ethnicity?
what I'm saying is that the origin of black people is not known by the majority of 85% of black people in America
Well,
don't
Malik,
know.
we'll talk about it tomorrow. We'll talk about it tomorrow.
Oh, what a
Yeah,
cliffhanger!
you need to
Yeah.
come back. We need to because we're not doing this anymore. We have DNA. We can see what we got. This is like massive amounts of research on our genetics.
Who you were
There's no
before slavery is not
secrets.
who you are today.
There's no secrets about what's up. So we don't get to make stuff up. Oh, we were all kings and queens from over here. I'm Mandinka.
Are you
No,
saying that I'm making something up or what?
Malik,
no.
Malik, we'll talk about this tomorrow, sir. Nikki, did you have any last words?
Good night, everybody. Malik Bart, are you coming back tomorrow?
Yes, I'll come back and I'll tell you what I learned from Master Farad Muhammad, who taught
Oh,
me how to
Lord.
get Elijah
Oh
Muhammad.
no.
Oh, yes. And if you can't deal with it, then I won't come back.
No,
Oh,
you
he's
Stop
going to
no.
or
throw a
lodge.
I'll
tantrum.
invite you. I'm inviting
Oh,
you
he's
back. Come
throwing a
back tomorrow.
tantrum on us.
All
Well,
right,
that
ladies and
just killed
gentlemen,
that cliffhanger.
I've enjoyed y'all, and I will see y'all tomorrow.
Shout out to everyone. Night, Professor.
Nikki, I'm sorry.
Wani, Nick of the God.
Did Nikki have any last words? I don't know if I said Nikki.
Oh, love
Good
you all.
night.
Okay. Good night,
Love
Salute,
you
y'all.
Professor.
more. Good night.
All right.
Boom.
See you, Stacy. See you guys.
All
Appreciate
right.
y'all. See y'all tomorrow. Bye.